Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for Nerds by Nerds, and today I'm hanging out with Mike Hunt from unMadeGaming.
That's me.
And got a YouTube channel, some social media stuff, but you're really big on Twitch. And I think you kind of kicked off your streaming career with Encounter Roleplay. Is that correct?
More or less, yeah. I joined Twitch I think about 4 months after Encounter Roleplay, and then I reached out to a bunch of Twitch streamers that were doing D&D type stuff, and I said, hey, I want to get into D&D. What are you guys doing? What works for you? Let's talk. And Will was one of the first people to reach back out to me. And was like, hey, I do a 24-hour stream every month. You want to come on? And I was like, sure. And I think I was on for like 3 games in that 24-hour period. And then from there, I was on several more 24-hour streams. And then I was on one of his one-shot games he ran on Thursdays. And then for the last 2 years, 1 3/4 years, I have been a regular cast member on his Monday show, playing all kinds of games. I actually ran some games on his show. So yeah, it's been awesome.
Sweet. And now you're doing your own thing.
Yeah, now we're about to hit 2,000 followers on Twitch. We just started, thanks to harassment from Dave and Cody from Take 20. We just started up our YouTube, and we're about to hit 300 or just hit 300 subscribers on YouTube. So that's pretty awesome. We basically just archive all of our content from Twitch to YouTube right now. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it seems to be kind of the standard. Plus, if you're not a Twitch partner, right, you can't keep it there.
Yeah, so the way it works for Twitch is like it automatically archives on Twitch for a certain amount of time, but then it falls off. But you can re-upload it to Twitch. But I figure if I'm going to upload it, I might as well upload it to YouTube, because that's where a lot of gaming content happens anyway. Plus, if I want to start making native content, it's a real easy shift to start throwing up extra stuff on there.
Yeah, I would agree. We've been looking at Twitch for years, going, should we Twitch or should we not Twitch? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like at a certain point, it's like there's so many things to do and get involved with, and like yep. I think we have like 50 followers over on Twitch. We don't do anything there.
Yeah, most people will like make an account just to have an account. Like, if you want to talk in chat, you need to have an account. But like a lot of people will just go follow you based on your activity in chat, or like the name Nerdarchy. Like, oh, I know those guys from YouTube. Click and you just get a few free follows that way. But yeah, it's an interesting platform, and the one thing I've seen that I like. This could be unique to tabletop, but I find it incredibly active on Twitch, is that the tabletop community, both the streamers and the DMs and the players, they're the nicest community on Twitch. Like, there's a lot of like infighting in some of the role play streams, some of the like video game streams, but there's never any issues that I've had with like tabletop community, which is awesome.
Yeah, the community is good. I mean, we've personally found we've had we could probably count on one hand the number of trolls we've had, and we're going into year 4. There was we had one instance in the one game that I run, which has all female players, but it only happened once, and even when it did happen, instantly that person got attacked by the chat.
Yeah, that's what happens usually. The chat is, because you have a live chat, and because you have the community is built around you being live and being able to interact with you, which I'm sure you see on the Saber Dice show. Is whenever there's a troll, I don't even have to do anything. My moderators and chat just leap all over the guy until he leaves, and I'm like, oh, well, thank you. I guess I'll continue to DM over here in my little corner. So yeah, it's real nice. The community is awesome when it comes to that kind of stuff.
The accidental DM says that's because trolls usually get slayed in D&D.
That's true. That is true. We had one the other day. There's a new feature on Twitch called Vodcast, which essentially lets you replay one of your shows. So I was replaying a show to generate some hype, because we were doing the new episode that night, and usually no one really watches your vodcast unless you're a huge streamer. So I think we had maybe 5 or 6 people in there, and a troll wandered in, and I give him an A+ for creativity. He was role-playing a story about some inappropriate behavior between orcs and elves in chat by himself. And then as soon as I saw it, I started interacting with him and oh, what happens next? What happened when this guy did this? And he got real awkward. And then I had the rest of my community just sidle into the chat room and just start messing with him too. He eventually just left. I was like, come on, man.
He was having his own little fantasy game by himself. No one's even in here, and then you messed it up.
Yep, I ruined his fun.
Oh man, we briefly had a run of cam girls showing up for our live chats. It didn't last very long.
Nice, that's always a fun time. I had that on. I still have it now, but I had it when I first started on Twitter all the time.
Oh yeah.
When it's more noticeable, and you're like, oh, someone liked my tweet. Let me go see who that is. And I'm like, oh, you're naked. You didn't actually like my tweet. Delete. Get out of here. Yeah, those are always fun.
Yeah, what are you gonna do, man? The internet is a strange.
Oh yeah, it's a weird time. Then I went to you were there, so like sometimes it's a catch-22 where it might be an actual person. We went to the to Gen Con. There was the post Ennies award, and there was several adult actresses who were also super into D&D. So like some of the girls on the cams might be into D&D, which is always weird because you just assume that they're not.
Yeah, I get, the hobby draws a lot of different people.
It sure does. Every facet of life, you have some unique hobbyists. We'll call them.
So speaking of conventions, that's where we actually met for the first time.
That is true. Yeah. Yep. I stumbled into and it was such a weird. I stumbled into a streamer friend of mine who introduced me to Sat and Rudy, who then introduced me to Black Magic and Bill Allen, who then introduced me to Cody, who then introduced me to you. It was the weirdest train of events, and this all has happened in maybe a matter of 6 hours. I was like, oh, today was a whirlwind.
you met Satine, Rudy, and Bill Allen. Then it was all downhill from there.
It was all downhill from there, yeah. Yep, and they were like, he was like, oh yeah, I'm hanging out with Cody. Was like, I'm hanging out with Dave, and I was like, okay, cool. He's like, Dave from Nerdarchy, and I was like, oh, okay, cool.
You're like, what's a Nerdarchy?
Yeah, who's a Nerdarch? What does that mean? Is that like anarchy but for nerds? Is it just total chaos? Yeah, he goes, yeah, it's him in the funny hat. I was like, oh, I know that guy. I watched that show. Yeah, and then it was all downhill from there.
We had a good time at Gen Con. I can't wait for next year.
We did. Yeah, and now Cody is harassing everyone on the East Coast to come down to PAX South so that we can be at his home turf and he doesn't have to travel anywhere.
Yeah, so, I've been trying to keep it to where I can like drive there.
Yeah. Yep.
Cut down on.
We do have Unplugged coming up in a week, so that's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, I'm curious how that one's gonna be weird because I'm just gonna be like driving in every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I've been going to PAX East for 5 or 6 years now. So I've seen that one kind of grow, but I didn't see it at the beginning. This past year, I went to PAX South, which I believe is the second year. This 2017 was PAX South, its second year, and it was very small, especially compared to the beast that is PAX East. So I'm assuming that PAX Unplugged is going to be a similar situation where it is very small, but like it's easy to walk around. Hence the tickets being so low. Like I think right now the PAX East tickets are like $150 for a 3-day, whereas I think Unplugged was like $60 for a 3-day. So I think it's going to be rather small, but I think it has the potential to explode like the rest of the PAXs.
So do you have any plans for attacking Unplugged?
I don't. I think I might go to the Monty Cook booth and run a game or two there. I was talking to their community manager, and I got the invite to come run a game or two. So I might do that. But I know I'm only there for Friday and Saturday. You guys are at a booth, right? You guys are you're a booth babe? Is that?
Hey, we're booth beards we prefer, actually.
Right.
It might be a step down. I don't know. Yeah, we're going to be hanging out with Brian Feaster and Open Legend.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's over, right?
What's over?
Brian Feaster and Open Legend. There was a Facebook post.
No,
he's done.
He's got a bunch of different businesses, as far as I know.
Yeah, he posted a big long thing the other day in several role playing communities, and on his own page, he's no longer operating Seventh Sanctum. I think.
That is the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, he's very shocked. I was like, oh no. He said, yeah, he's not producing any more Open Legend content. He's relying on the community to make all new content. And once all the stuff comes out from the Kickstarter, he's done for now. I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, because that's how I met him, was through Will, through the Kickstarter. And I actually played with him when it was still in like Google Spreadsheets alpha version of Open Legend. And I know you guys have played it. I know you're a fan of his. I know other streamers play the game. So I was very shocked to see that news. I was like, oh no, what happened?
Yeah, dude, I am hearing this for the first time. I'm like, oh wow, I wonder how that affects what we're doing. Does this mean I don't have to run any games?
Yeah, it's just you in the booth. He doesn't actually show up. I'm like, oh, this is embarrassing. Now it becomes a Nerdarchy booth.
Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, it's strange.
Huh.
And so close to a convention too. That's why I was like, oh no, what happened? I was like, is this a prank? What happened here? Yeah.
Yeah. And he's supposed to be doing another GM improv as well.
Really?
At PAX Unplugged. Like they got like the big room, whatever the big room is.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be Satine and Matt Mercer.
Well, yeah, you did the first one at Gen Con, right?
I was there. We recorded it.
Oh, right.
And the second one is supposed to be recorded too and streamed to Hyper RPG.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it will be awesome if it's still happening.
If it still happens, yeah, exactly.
I know that, and it's not like sharing anything private because he had sent it out in emails and all over the place. But a while back, he had like problems with marriage and stuff. And
yeah, he's posted that relatively publicly. That like Seventh Sanctum was the turning point in his life with his whole personal side of things. But yeah, he posted a huge big thing on Facebook saying that change in life and dynamics is what he's going for.
Yeah, I saw he's divesting himself of some other thing that he was doing as well.
Yeah.
No, man, maybe he's gonna go live on a mountaintop somewhere.
That's literally what he said. He said, I'm gonna go live in the woods. And I was like, I can't tell if you're sarcastic or not, because he does have some pretty quick one-liners and stuff. But I was like, I don't know, that's a serious statement, man. Oh no.
Everyone's got a midlife crisis their own way.
Yep. Yep. I'm just waiting. I literally just turned 30 like less than a month ago, so I'm just waiting for my midlife crisis to hit now.
You got at least a decade. You're good.
Yeah. Well, the more they extend our lifespan, the longer I have to wait for this crisis. Will I like buy a boat or a motorcycle I'll never use, or something like that, or start a YouTube channel and a Twitch thing and quit my job? One of the two. One of the two.
Oh, man, it's a crazy world we live in. So what games are you running on your channel right now? What can people look for?
So right now we are wrapping up Curse of Strahd on Tuesdays, and that campaign has almost entirely derailed, which is I think fairly common for any D&D game. We basically have a schedule for this one because one of the players has to leave, and they haven't found any of the items they need to fight Strahd. They've encountered Strahd several times, and he's almost killed them every time, mostly just to toy with them. And I think they just might have usurped the rule of Vallaki and have taken it over for themselves. I'm not really sure what the plan was there, but they're doing that. Then on Wednesdays, we just wrapped up season 2 finale of our Blades in the Dark campaign. And if you guys follow Blades in the Dark at all, you can't miss the hashtag 6 and 20. 6 and 20 is actually, I think it's a really cool endeavor. It's essentially what you're doing with Saber Dice, but the exact inverse. So instead of getting several big names and putting them on one show, we have one show on several channels. So we have one DM who DMs on Tuesdays on his channel, Wednesdays on my channel, and Thursdays on another friend of ours' channel. And it's all one shared world, one shared city, and we're all interacting in that city. So there have been times where like the different crews on different channels have almost come to blows. There's been times where the different crews on different channels are going after the same objective, and it's basically a race, but you have to wait a week to catch up to your race, it's pretty crazy. But there's this whole huge world developing around us, and every time one crew does something, the other two have to react and overcome whatever challenge they left in our way, which is super rad. So we're moving on to season 3 of that in 2 weeks. We get some filler content coming out in between. We're doing a 3rd season of that, and then from there, hot scloozies, the guys. I think we're moving on to City of Mist as our new 6 and 20 show, which is also going to be a shared world, but we're all going to be like superheroes. So it's going to be a different tone shift on that one. And then on Thursdays, I run my homebrew campaign called Timberlane Tales, which is currently in D&D 5e. And then on Sundays, we run a new Swedish game called Symbaroum, which is a super lethal, gritty, dark fantasy kind of game, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, I heard about that one earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
I guess because apparently it was making the rounds in the one chat group.
Yeah, so it came out in 2015 in Sweden, and they launched a Kickstarter late 2015, early 2016 to have it translated to English. And then once it did, I think a lot of what helped that one along is the artwork is so different than any other fantasy game's artwork that it draws you. Like that artwork alone is enough to make you go, oh, what's this? And click on it and give it a brief look at. But it's cool. It's one of those inverse games where you roll low. You have to roll low as opposed to rolling high, and like your stats and your health are pretty much the exact same the entire game. It doesn't really increase at all, and everything is super lethal. And it's not your typical Tolkien fantasy. It's more like Brothers Grimm fantasy, where like changelings aren't a fun race that just change their face. No, they're elves that steal your baby and replace your baby with some kind of weird monster that you live with for 13 years and then realize is a weird monster. So it's pretty weird and kind of cool and like very dark, very Hellboy-esque Brothers Grimm kind of thing.
So chat, if you guys do have questions, feel free to ask them. Just put question before it. It makes it easier for us to find them.
Hell yeah.
So you also you had mentioned Tales from the Loop.
I did. Yeah, I have a problem where I can't stop backing things on Kickstarter. And I also apparently love the Swedes because I played and backed a game called Mutant Year 1. And then the same company, Free League, made Coriolis and then subsequently made Tales from the Loop. And it all runs in the same system, which doesn't really have a name. But Tales from the Loop is amazing. It is it's essentially Stranger Things, the RPG.
Or Goonies. Or
yeah, exactly. It's any 80s kid movie, like kid action adventure. It's great. And for anyone who lived through the 80s or anyone who lived like at the ass end of the 80s, like myself, who grew up on all the 80s culture, it has the same effect as Stranger Things, where you watch it and you feel all that nostalgia and you're like, oh yeah, remember the Goonies? Remember Footloose? Remember, all these other things media things that came out at that time? But it's very cool. It's an awesome system, super simple. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of it.
Jim Davis just ninja'd me and mentioned Kids on Bikes, the RPG. Have you seen that?
Yeah, Kids. So again, I have an addiction. Kids on Bikes literally just launched on Kickstarter 3 days ago, and I've already backed it. Yeah, it looks awesome. I looked through. That one looks much closer to Stranger Things because you have the children, and then as a group, the players and the DM create a superpowered kid, basically like 11. And then the DM plays the superpowered kid, but the players decide when it acts and when it uses its powers. So it's kind of like a collab, like everyone plays this one super character, which is pretty cool. Plus it's incredibly rules light.
Yeah. Those games just don't appeal to me. I don't know why. Like the whole, like, I don't want to play a kid, I guess, is what it comes down to. And I like action more than drama.
Yep.
Like I like to have drama in with my action, right? It should be there. So this doesn't have a lot of appeal to me. But like the Tales from the Loop, Doug had grabbed it, and I was looking through the art, and I was like, wow, it looks great visually. Yeah. Yep. Visually, it's really impressive. But I would try it. Like I definitely would give anything a try. But
I forget what his name is. It's something there's a lot of umlauts and a lot of vowels that touch other vowels because he's also Swedish. Simon something is the guy who did all the art behind it, behind Tales from the Loop. And before he worked with Tales from the Loop, he actually had released several art books with his weird. Basically, it looks like Swedish farmhouses and kids in like parkas, and then a giant 2-footed walking at coming towards them, and you're like, oh shit, what is this? And that's why the company jumped all over him to get this to get him to do the art for it, because he had that weird mix of like rural hometown life with super futuristic laser robots
stuff. Yeah. So as Zarif Gaming and Mike is pointing out, there's some questions in the chat. So Insect Hunter has a question. Would you say that it's someone who hasn't got the Skag is better off buying Xanathars? Forget about the Skag, since a lot of it is in Xanathars. The problem with the Skag was it's a very thin book with not a lot of content, but not all the content in the Skag is in Xanathar's guide. So it depends on what you really want. You know,
I don't think any of the Skag stuff is in Xanathar's, is it?
It is. There's 4 subclasses that make it in. Okay. So there's a couple that didn't make it in, and there's the spells and there's the backgrounds. But like literally, like when we like kind of reviewed it, we're like, yeah, we paid, you know, whatever the Amazon price was to get these, like, you know, to get like this small portion of the book, because most of it is Forgotten Realms, and if you don't care about Forgotten Realms, you're not going to get as much value out of that.
That's what I was going to say. If you are playing Forgotten Realms and you are new to Forgotten Realms, get Skag. If you are playing Forgotten Realms and have been playing it since the dawn of Forgotten Realms, you don't need it. There's nothing new in there that you don't already know about Forgotten Realms. And if you aren't playing Forgotten Realms or any published D&D world, then you probably don't need it either. Go for the more setting agnostic stuff.
And I also feel like you could just wiki a lot of Forgotten Realms at this point, because it's been out there so long.
Yeah, just not the D&D wiki.
It just always comes down to, what is it you're looking to do? What do you want? What is your budget? You know, like we buy most of the adventures. We never run any of them. So I'm a horrible person to ask. I mean, like,
I do the same thing. I buy all the adventures here and then don't read them, and I just kind of make up what happens in them, and my players believe me. So
I've got this weird issue with pre-written adventures. I think it takes way more time and prep for me to do one of those than to just run a game.
Yep. But I skim a few pages and then I just improv what I think is supposed to happen. It's mostly me making it up.
Accidental DM, what are the vintage tabletop role-playing games that are must-plays still today? That's a good question. I'm going to go with Marvel Phase Rip, because we're playing that game and it's dead.
Man, if you can survive the rulings of 2nd edition, I recommend Traveler. I played a game based off of Traveler, which made me want to play Traveler, but I can't survive 2nd edition rules because they're just too many, and they don't make a lot of sense. Like some of them are kind of ass backwards, especially if you're used to playing in modern settings, to go and like relearn more complicated variants of rules. But Traveler is a pretty awesome space game, and Traveler is what Stars Without Number is based off of. So if you guys like gritty, lethal space games, it's a pretty solid one.
Yeah, there's so many, but you know, honestly, to be honest, I feel like the modern games are just better. It's like anything, right?
Yeah.
Like you remember it doing like. My motto is never go back, because you're going to be disappointed for the most part in most things. Yeah. Like, you know, like the cartoons you loved as a kid, watch them now and they're really shitty compared to, you know, what kids have today. Like they're better written, and they have, you know, better animation. So like I've gone back and tried to watch stuff and have my kids watch it and like torture them, and it's not good.
It's one of those things you got to remember, like they were made for the time. So like 2nd edition was made for just dungeon delving and crushing through monsters. Like 2nd edition is where Tomb of Horrors came from. It's where White Plume Mountain came from. So like you have all that. The whole focus was you're a player, you're a character in a tavern, and you want to go get riches in a dungeon. That's it. The whole game is you in a dungeon. Whereas now a lot of the games have a more narrative bent, and it's more about the story and less about dungeon delving and killing monsters. It's more about like the growth progression of your character. So the rules sort of favor role play, and there's actually rules on like how to, you know, grant XP for role play, whereas that would never be even a thought in 2nd edition.
Now, I think Marvel Phase Rip holds up better than a lot of the other ones.
Yeah.
But only because it was so different than the games that were coming out at the time.
Sure.
And far ahead of its time. It may be the first game where you spend your XP.
Yep.
You know, I can't think of any others that came out before. The karma system was not designed to to get away from characters that just want to kill stuff. Matter of fact, you're penalized for that and rewarded for being heroic. So,
which is pretty, pretty awesome.
That for that one aspect, I would say it's really ahead of its time. But on the other side, there are other superhero games that have come out since then that have better mechanics for actually creating a superhero.
Yeah. In fact, Monty Cook Games is actually dropping their new superhero book soon. I just got a preview copy from the Kickstarter. It's called Unmasked, and it uses the Cypher system, which is a really simple system, in my opinion. It looks really complicated when you first started getting involved in it, but it turns out to be incredibly easy to learn. But yeah, they're dropping a new game called Unmasked, which is pretty cool. And of course, like I said earlier, City of Mist is a superhero game as well.
Yeah, I actually backed that, and that's the one I got. Although I didn't receive it yet. I wonder if I was supposed to go do something that I didn't do
for City of Mist.
No, for Monty Cook the World's a Cipher. That was the
the expanded worlds one. Yeah, it hasn't come out yet, but they released a few like PDFs about like the world story and that kind of thing. So that's been kind of neat to read through their lore.
Yeah, I was torn between the masks, or is it masks or unmasked?
The Monty Cook one is Unmasked, but there is another game called Masks.
Yeah, so Unmasked, I was torn between that one, which is like superhero meets horror, I believe is like what they're selling it.
Yeah,
and the dinosaur one.
Oh yeah. I actually bought the entire expanded worlds thing. I have Predation right behind me. The dinosaur one. That one's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
I got a chance to play that one at Gen Con a little bit.
Yep.
So we did a demo of that, and my son was all about anything where he can interact with dinosaurs.
Yeah,
and he's like, I don't care what these characters are. I just want to be the one that has the Ankylosaurus.
Yeah.
And then they got him with the sucker punch, because like, here's your character, here's your pet. Now hand your pet to the person to the left.
Yeah. Yep. And they switch you around. Yeah. There's a video game called Ark Survival Evolved, I think. And essentially that's the same thing. It's like you wake up on an island, you have a weird chip in your arm, you start naked, and then you build stuff, like you chop down trees and you build your own society. But as the game progresses to like the more advanced levels, you can like train and capture pterodactyls and T-Rexes and brontosaurs, and you can build like Flintstone-esque buildings on top of the brontosaurs, and then you can eventually get like laser pistols, and you're like, so essentially Predation is Ark, the RPG, which is awesome. It's sci-fi and you get to ride a dinosaur. So
yeah, I kind of equated it to Dino Riders.
Yeah, wow, that's a throwback.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little older.
Yeah, but it's an awesome game.
But yeah, so guys, let's jump into the chat and get some roll call going on. We got more questions that seem to be rolling in today.
Yeah.
Let's see. Kyle, how interested would players be in running a Lord of the Rings styled fantasy world, but with superpowers instead of magic? Isn't it kind of the same thing at that point?
I mean, if you're running a Lord of the Rings style fantasy world, there isn't magic. That's the whole point of Lord of the Rings. Like there's only like 4 wizards, right? There's the 2 blue wizards, the white wizards, the 5 wizards. So like regular people don't use magic. In fact, was it Cubicle 7? Somebody just recently made a mod for D&D 5e called Adventures in Middle-earth. And yeah, there's no magic in it. It's super magic light. There's a few magic-like abilities, like spell-like abilities, but it's super magic light. So I think Lord of the Rings style fantasy world wouldn't have magic, but yeah, I guess using superpowers instead of magic would just be the same thing in a fantasy setting, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would flavor a little bit different. There was Mickey Reichert-Zucker put out a book called The Legend of Nightfall. It is set in medieval times. She's got the last Renshai trilogy and series as well, which is really good. So I picked that one up, read that, and like the main character is like this assassin who is essentially a mutant, right? He's got like the one superpower that he uses throughout it.
Yep.
And you know, I don't even remember if they refer to it as magic or not, but it really just made me feel like this is like the X-Men assassin in medieval times. So like Legend of Nightfall, Mickey Rucker-Zeiker, you can check that out. That's kind of like what you're talking about, maybe. She's a really good writer though, so either way, you'll probably enjoy it. So we got Pokemon for What in Minas Tirith Gondor. Man, you guys, you can't fool me. I know they ain't got no Wi-Fi out there.
I don't believe you. That's
We got Raven coming to us from the OZ. Monroe, Louisiana, in the house with Jacob. Patrick's in Sweden. Jim Davis from WebDM in Burlington. We got Kyle coming to us from British Columbia. Let's see. Yes, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would allow you to play a dinosaur. Challenger. Warrigal Keep is in Arkansas. We have Virginia in the house with Jennifer. We have Zaref Gaming in Redicio, New Mexico. Challenger is in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. We got Utah with Regilio in the house. We've got Madam Gandalf with New Zealand. We also have Wilder Smith coming to us from New York. We got Missouri in the house with the Accidental DM. We got California with Satori Shin. Seattle, Washington with Frigginator. Elsewhere with the 19th. Boston in the house with Kevin. SG in Winnipeg. And we've got Tampa, Florida with Jose Suarez in the house. And Doug is in Cleveland. We also got Uncle Peter in Toronto. It's always a problem. Like I call for roll call, start talking, they start the roll call, and then they jump back into the conversation.
Yeah.
And you start reading roll call, then they start telling us where they're from.
You gotta scroll back and forth to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's all good. You know, that's one of my favorite parts of seeing nerds all over the world.
Yeah, where everyone's from is pretty rad.
So
that's always the weirdest part about analytics, which I still don't understand at all. But when you're like, oh, who watched my video? You're like, Guam. Why? What are you doing in Guam? How did you find this? Like, you always get like the ones and twos that's like Stockholm, Sweden. Like, how did you find me in Stockholm, Sweden? What were you searching for to accidentally stumble on my video and then watch it?
We've got like 3 or 4 people that show up to the live chats from Sweden.
Wow.
There's a bunch of times where there's been like 3 of them in there at the same time. I'm like, are you guys all hanging out together? What are you doing?
It's just one. They're all in one room on their phone.
Yeah.
That's
But
awesome.
it's all good. It's fun, And the I guess you've probably experienced this too with the online gaming. Like we're gaming with people that are all over the world.
Yeah.
Which is
we have
amazing.
I'm trying to think. We have one cast member from New Zealand. We have other cast members from various parts of the UK. To be honest, they all blend into one giant country for me, which is mostly because of my experience streaming with Will. A lot of people from the UK follow Will, and then they follow you as an associate of his. We have one on one of the games on that 6 and 20 collaborative world situation. We play that 8 to 11, which is like midnight to 4 a.m. or like 1 to 4 a.m. in the UK, and she shows up every week to play. And I'm like, you're out of your mind. Like, there's no way I would be up at 4 a.m. playing tabletop games on a Wednesday or a Thursday. I'm like, no, crazy. Yeah, it's awesome though.
Someone must not have a job to go to the next morning or something. I know for me, even just playing the Saver Dice game where we wrap up around midnight is kind of brutal. I was telling you earlier, like I overslept this morning. I woke up and it's like, oh crap, it's after 10 o'clock already. I have a live chat to set up and things to do.
Yep.
And last night after the game, like I know a lot of people have said this, that you're kind of still hyped and like high, you're on that after game high, and then it's like, well, maybe I'll just do a little work, and then before you know it, it's like 3 a.m.
Yep. Or it's the opposite, and you have that after game and you crash real hard. I had that last night. We had I know you said you're more action based. We had a lot of heavy role play in like it was a finale, so we had a lot of storylines wrapping up and then like leading into season 3. And it was like there was literally parts where like one player was having like her own monologue situation, and the rest of the cast just sat there wide-eyed watching in terror as she killed people. And we're like, oh no. Oh, but like after the 4-hour game, I was exhausted. I was like, no, that's it. I'm gonna go to bed, turn everything off. I can't. Yep. Super tiring when it comes to that.
So what kind of have you played Tales from Loop? Are you running adventures there?
I've played it. I've played in 4 one-shots. Well, I guess 1 3-shot and then another one-shot. So I've played about 4 3-hour sessions in the game. We're going to be getting that on the channel at some point. It's just a matter of hours and days. But we just ran a one-shot 2 weeks ago for Halloween, and we're running another one-shot for Christmas with that game.
Yeah, like that's just it's just one of those concepts, one of those genres where I'm like, I don't know how I would run this game. Like, yeah. I don't know what stories I would tell, especially like because Tales from the Loop is like you do the weird stuff right as kids, but then also you're supposed to also do the like normal kid stuff as well.
Yeah. Well, so this is also a huge, like in all the Swedish games I play, they all do this kind of thing. And I'm not sure if this is like a renaissance of like an old kind of game or like this is just a new style that's emerging, but they use what everyone refers to as scenes, right? And so there's no filler content. Whereas like, if you're playing D&D, it's like, okay, you're in the bar. Okay, now you're going to walk through the street to, someone's house. And then you have like the little walking through the street monologue. This is just, okay, the scene is you're at, you're in the clubhouse. And then when you decide the clubhouse scene ends, the DM just narratively, okay, the next scene is going to start here. Describe to me how you got there. And it's just like a quick little in between, and then you boom here. So like all of the action and scenes happen with the kids outside of school, but like you have to be home when the streetlights come on because you have school tomorrow. So whatever adventure you're on, you see the streetlights come on, and now you have to make a choice. Do I go home late and get yelled at, or do we stop the adventure and go home and then hope that when we come back tomorrow, whatever we were doing is still ready to be done? Which is kind of a cool thing. But they do that with all of all the Swedish games that I'm playing currently have that same scene by scene sort of structure, which is neat.
So what kind of adventures have you played with that so far? If you don't mind, I'm personally curious.
So the first one we did was the published adventure inside the game. And basically the story is the story starts kind of like Flash, where like someone's building like a Hydra collider or some nonsensical made up sci-fi thing. And they build this sci-fi thing in your town or adjacent to your town. And like, because of it, some weird stuff starts happening. So weird, like Twilight Zone or whatever other fantasy weird things that happen. So the first we ran is a published one in the book called like Summer is for the Birds or something like that. And essentially there was a guy who was doing research from the Loop, and he was trying to see if he could implant chips into birds to make them smarter or something like that. And then he created like these hyper smart birds who could like speak and could be controlled by this machine. And then the birds like attacked the guy and he dies, and the machine kind of goes haywire. So now all the predatory birds are taking over and killing all of the smaller birds, and now they're doing like the movie Birds, and they're attacking people. So like the kids see this, and now the kids have to go solve this adventure, which was kind of cool. And then the one we just ran, which was a one-shot made up by one of our buddies, it was called Halloween from the Loop. And essentially there was this new store in town that had these new animatronic masks. So instead of buying that little rubber mask you normally buy for Halloween in 1985, they were the masks that you'd go in, they would fit to your face, and you decide what do you want. You want to be a shark? Do you want to be a werewolf? And they would customize this thing with like this fabrication machine, and then they hit a button and it kind of like shrinks down to your face, and like it has like animatronics and moves. Which was awesome. And then in the game, something happened. There was like a radio signal that flicked a switch that morphed the mask into a zombie and sort of mind controlled the kids wearing it. So like we were just getting attacked by zombie children, and we had to like hit. I think my character like hit him, and like one of the other character was a jock, and he hit him, and I took the mask off, and I could see that there was like some weird beeping light. So I hit the light, and the mask transforms back into like a mummy. And you're like, okay, what's going on with these masks? So we had to trace it back to the original store, and it was like somebody knocked out the creator and repurposed his machine for illicit means to turn the kids evil, and use them as zombie as essentially zombies with radio waves, which is pretty cool. So it's like weird sci-fi stuff where it's like it makes sense for the plot, is because the main plot is the parents don't believe you. like in all of the 80s movies. So like, oh, mom, the masks are turning kids into zombies. No parent is going to believe that. Like, that's just a crazy thing that a 10-year-old says. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting game when it comes to like ridiculous stuff, but it is definitely a ridiculous game.
I would have to start off by just ripping off movies from the 80s.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, there's no reason not to.
Christine, Gremlins, whatever.
Oh, yeah. Yep, for sure. Yeah. And that's what it's good for, though, is you have it's literally like playing the Goonies. So you have a plethora of things to pull from that are these campy 80s kids adventures that are preposterous to just grab and throw into the game. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I really like it.
You're starting to sell me on it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, as you're, I just like from the outside looking in, I couldn't like envision what the adventures look like, what the sessions would look like. But after hearing you talk, I'm like, oh, and then you have to do this, like the progression's there.
Yeah. You can take like any fantasy plot, like again, zombies attack the adventurers. Now you put it in modern 80s, and how do we make that happen with sci-fi? And like, okay, and it's pretty easy to convert most things to that. Like I said, any 80s movie is a great example. Stranger Things is a great example. There's a book out that they're making into a movie right now called Ready Player One. That has a bunch of awesome 80s references to adventuring, things like that. 80s cartoons is a great example. So yeah, you have a lot of material to pull from and tweak for that game, which is pretty rad.
Well, yeah, we actually have one of the guys from Kids on Bikes coming on next week, I believe, next Wednesday.
Yeah.
So I'll have to pick their brain about that a little bit more as well. So what is your favorite game? Do you have a favorite, or pretty much play anything?
Ooh, man, I am a huge fanboy, and anyone in my community will tell you, of Cypher System, because I'm a fan of Cypher System in the way that so many other people are a fan of like Fate, and for the exact same reasons. Because you can literally take Cypher Systems, and with little effort, you can tweak it and play anything. Like we just discussed, there's Numenera, there's Predation with dinosaurs, there's Unmasked with superheroes, there's like horror ones, there's one where you can play gods. There's a crazy amount of stuff you can cover with a simple rule set. And that's what I like. The less rules I have to remember, because I'm not going to do it anyway, the less rules I have to remember, the better.
Yeah, I mean, we've played Cypher System once so far, and we actually played a Shadowrun game with it.
Yeah.
Now I feel like the GM that ran that game for us actually overcomplicated things and tried to make it too much like Shadowrun.
Yep.
Compared to what I personally would have done. As a GM, it's hard to not like armchair GM.
Yeah.
But that being said, it was still a lot of fun, and Cypher System's a great rule set for taking maybe settings that you really enjoy, but you don't really enjoy the mechanics so much, and re-envisioning them.
Yep. I literally am building a fantasy world right now, and I spent, I think, maybe 2 hours. I combed through all of the Cypher System books, and I pulled out all of the descriptors that I want that make sense in my head for a fantasy world, and I essentially built a character list of what your options can be. Could I have used D&D? For sure. Are the D&D rules good for what I wanted to do ultimately, which is a West Marches style game? No, they're terrible for West Marches style games. So I was like, you know what? Cypher System is super gear light. It's super rules light. Anyone can learn it, and just throw everybody in that. So I'm tweaking it for a fantasy game. I also made a, I guess it could be, I guess it's more like cyberpunk than anything else. That was my first one shot I think I ever ran, was with Cypher Systems. It's called The Fixers, and essentially there's like bionics companies throughout the city that like do, dark things, like off the radar type things, and when one of their satellite companies has an issue, they call them the Fixers. And so like one guy was a cyborg who had like a chest cannon. The other person was a guy who rolled around, I think he was an assassin who rolled around on roller skates or Heelys and used yo-yos as weapons, which is also ridiculous. One person was a psychic, and it was awesome. And basically they went into a genetics lab, and there was like robot security guards in there because of what the genetics lab they were doing. But the genetics lab was modifying humans to live on plasma. So essentially, they were modifying humans to become vampires, and one of them broke out and attacked all of the scientists. So all the scientists were dead, and no one was controlling the robots anymore. So the robots were kind of going haywire, and that was basically the whole plot of the game: was go in there, figure out what happened, and fix it if you can.
That kind of makes me think a little bit about Big Hero 6.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't know. It just kind of invokes that. I kind of want to play a game with Cypher System based off of a series that I read called Hard Luck Hank.
Okay.
And it's this really like space opera, tongue-in-cheek. Most of it happens on a space station, and it's like this outlaw place, and it's just hilarious. Like the opening scene is the main character just like walking off of like a train platform, and falling like 4 stories because he's like invulnerable and can't be hurt. Yeah. But he moves so slow and he's just lazy, and he's just like, it's just easier this way.
That's awesome. That's pretty rad.
But the whole series is full of that. We actually listened to it driving out to Gen Con. Me and my son, the newest one, and it had him cracking up the whole time because he's a hero, but he's definitely not your typical hero. Yeah. Like his job is like he's an intermediate between basically crime lords is how things start off.
Nice. That's awesome.
And he's like, I'm perfect for the job because, when everyone pulls out their guns and starts shooting after they're done and they realize like they can't hurt me, they have no choice but to talk.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty cool. I was just talking about a game I played in where one of the characters was I think he was a clever Jack who manipulates time. But his character, his uniqueness was that he didn't know when he was in his own timeline. So like he looked a certain way, but didn't know why he looked that way. And so he would go through and like, there would be times where like, he gets shot or something. And then he looks down and sees that he already has the hole. And he's like, oh, okay, that's why I have this hole this whole time, is because I got shot here. Okay, cool. Now we're good. And like he would learn his own history and present and past all at the same time. Like he would there was times where like, he actually encountered himself, but he was like a Victorian era gentleman. So he didn't know when in that timeline he was. Was he actually a Victorian era gentleman, or was he from the future in a place where he needed to dress like a Victorian gentleman? So it was kind of all over the place. It was a really fun character to interact with because he was very confused and knew a lot, but then didn't know other basic things because he wasn't sure where he was or if he could tell you what he knew without like blowing your mind. So it was a very interesting character to play, very wacky.
He's like your confused grandfather.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like any adventurer with Alzheimer's. Is what I was like, oh, you're adorable.
So Jack has a question. How do you add advantage to a roll? And what is it? Advantage is whenever basically advantageous situation happens in D&D and you grab 2d20s, roll them both, pick the highest, pick the better one.
Yep. Reroll, take the higher. That's pretty much it. Super simple.
Yeah, that is one of the things I think a lot of us have gravitated towards in 5e, where it's not like this endless stream of numbers you have to add to everything.
Yeah, I'm not about. I had that problem, and I was actually a fan of 4th edition, and I had that problem with that, where like you have, okay, I'm next to you, and I have this power, so you get a +2 on your AC, and then you're behind cover, which is another +3 on AC. And I'm like, okay, I need someone else to do. I need a mathematician to sit here and do this calculation for me. I'm just gonna roll dice, and you tell me what the numbers mean.
Yeah. If you need a PA to figure out the math for you.
Yeah, it's too much. Like I don't need a TI 98 calculator to do the math on this thing. Too much.
I guess I don't know. I guess it makes some people feel smarter because they have more math to do or something. I'm like, I could do it, but why?
Yeah, I want something simple and easy. I want, okay, you roll twice, cool, do it. You roll twice.
Like my MO for playing new games is I really don't spend a lot of time learning, like reading beforehand. I'm just like, look, let me show up, give me a character. Yeah, I'll tell you what I want to do. You tell me what to roll. Yeah,
that's actually I've had several discussions with people about like new players in tabletop games, and that's my thing. Is I would prefer that you spend the time learning how to role play, because I feel like if you can role play, you can play any system, right? Like you can pop up a game right now, and if I know a little bit about the lore, I can make a character that makes sense in the world, and I can role play with you. I don't need to know the mechanics. That's the DM's job. Like, it's your job to know some of the mechanics, but like, tell me what you want to do, and I'll tell you how to do it. Roll me this. Okay, use this ability. Do this kind of thing. Like, as a GM, that's what I'd prefer. Don't spend your time, memorizing hundreds of pages of mechanics. Spend your time learning to role play and help make a better story. I'll worry about some of the mechanics, and you can fill in the blanks.
Yeah, those mechanics, they almost become like a straitjacket.
Yeah.
Like, once you give someone a list of things that they can do, they won't do anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some people might, but for the most people will be like, oh, these are the things I can do.
Yeah.
And their brain shuts off. But if you go, no, just let me know what you want to do, and they don't have a list to pick through, they're just gonna come up with things that are based on the circumstances and the situation. And then you as a GM can go, all right, roll this or roll that. And like you said,
because you get that new player paralysis where they see the sheet in front of them and say, okay, I want to roll perception. Okay, but what do you want to do? I want to roll perception. Okay, what do you think that does? And what's your end goal to do? Do you want to see a guy? Are you trying to listen for something? What are you trying to do? Can I just roll perception? No, God damn it, you can't just roll. Tell me what you want to do. I'll figure it out.
And and it's a trap too for more experienced players that I see we fall into, and we do that. Can I make this check, or can I make that check? Like, so we start playing the game instead of doing the role playing.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's real easy to do. The same thing with if you're playing theater of the mind or playing with miniatures. When you put the miniatures out, and especially if they're especially if they're exact representations, then I find as a GM I'm far more likely to be lazy and not give descriptions.
Yeah.
But when I play online and we're just using a Google Hangout like this, and I just have to describe it, it has there's a couple different things that happen. One, I find it pulls the players in, and even my more experienced players go, oh, I think I know what that is, but I'm not sure. And new players get to experience the monster for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of me just putting down the mini of the orc and going, there's an orc.
Yeah. I have that same problem. Like, I don't use maps in almost any of my games. I use it for the Curse of Strahd game because I was like, oh, we're putting it on Roll20. I might as well buy the Roll20 package and make it pretty for stream. But I find myself going through that same problem where I have to remind myself to describe, like, okay, you walk into this room and like you see the visual representation on the map. It's like I don't explain it to you. I'm like, shit, I got to go back. Or like I'll have players do it where they say, okay, I'm going to move behind this character. I'm like, okay, so you move. So then I try to step in. I'm like, okay, so you shift around the orc and you draw your battle axe. And what does the hit look like? So like I have to remember to draw the RP out of people when there's a map and tokens involved, or when, like, even for myself, like I said, when I see the map, I say, okay, you can see that there are 4 windows and a curtain on each one and a fire pit here. I don't have to describe that to you, but I'm like, yeah, that takes away some of the luster of the role playing, I guess. So I have to force myself to do that role play, to do that description.
I think the trick is to try and describe the things that the map can't tell them.
Yeah.
Like maybe textures and smells, sounds, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But even again, it's just like it's like a new way of doing the game, so you have to like relearn as a GM. And we're humans, right? So it's real easy to just get lazy.
Yep.
And be like, you like you said, they can see what's there.
Yeah. And I think for me, 4th edition is what made that switch for me. I played 3.5 and 3, and we were broke kids in high school and younger. So we didn't have money for maps and miniatures and all that kind of stuff. So it was in the day where I had my notebook and the DM says, okay, there's a column, there's a hallway that's 40 feet and then takes a left, and I draw a 40-foot column and then I make it hook left, and I'm drawing the map as we're going because I needed to see something or so we didn't get lost. But then when I switched to 4th edition, we had I had the fortunate that a civilian buddy of mine in Afghanistan, he reached out to Wizards and said, hey, I want to run D&D for the soldiers that are deployed. Can you send me stuff? And they just dumped stuff at him. So we had minis, we had maps, we had tokens, we had modules, we had all kinds of stuff. He reached out to Paizo too. So when I first started playing 4th edition, which was when I was in Afghanistan, we had all this stuff. And I was like, oh, this is a new fun way to play with toys. But I had this visual. And then when I went home and started playing 4th edition, I bought dry erase maps, and I bought minis, and I bought tokens, and I bought all kinds of stuff. And then when I switched to 5, I was like, oh yeah, I don't need all that stuff. I forgot. Like, I can just tell you what you see. And then we started playing online where we didn't have maps and stuff easily, and I wasn't going to take the time to make and edit them in Photoshop because I don't have that kind of skill. So I just was like, oh, okay, well, we're just going to go back to verbally describing what you see, and I'll paint you a picture.
You can check out Dungeon Painter Studios, PyroMaster.com. Very easy and convenient to use. Now,
sounds like a good plug. I'll check this out. Is there a giveaway going on right now or something?
Yeah, something like that, I believe. Actually, before I had used that a couple of years ago. Robert Ogre in the One Shot group actually turned me on to them, and it is a really cool program and easy to use.
Yeah.
But I've hardly prepped anything, so what am I going to do on a map?
Exactly.
It's great when my players start mapping things. I'm like, oh, good, there's a map now.
Yeah. I prep for maybe 15 minutes for a session, and then even then, it's mostly like the recap of last session and then a few bullet points, and then I improv the rest and I make it up. Yeah,
it's a lot of what I did. I did when I went down to ThinkGeek, I did actually write up a little bit of stuff. I was a little nervous because they were streaming it to their Twitch, their YouTube, and their Facebook simultaneously, and they had like 3 cameras set up and a switcher. So it was a little higher production, and it was going to be going out to a lot more people than our stuff usually reaches, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and even still, I was like, I made up like 4 NPCs and gave them, had some blurbs about them and kind of like an idea of encounters that I might do.
Yep.
I love using D&D Beyond because I just open up multiple tabs and have the monsters that I'm going to use in those tabs.
That's what I do with Roll20, because like I said, I decided if I'm going to run Crysis Rod, I might as well have some pretty pictures to show everybody. So I was like, and I think it was like, what, $20? So I was like, I'll buy the module. And in the module, it tells you like, here's what's happening in this town, and like, here's this NPC, and it like gives you a link to the NPC's picture and backstory and his monster card. And I'm like, oh, well, that's convenient. Here's the magic items he has. I'm like, click, 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 and I just open all of his stuff. So I'm like, yeah, that's super awesome.
The D&D Beyond, what I like about that is like when you open up to like the monster, if the monster has spells, everything has hover cards.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't even have to click to see, oh, well, what does this do? I can just mouse over and be like, oh, nice.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Unfortunately, when we play our home game, we use my laptop to record the game. Yeah. So I don't have access. So
yep. That's why you need multiple cameras. You need an array, iPads.
Yeah.
Oh, but we got a new question in here.
We do have a new question.
We got here. Insect Hunter says, one issue I have with Theater of the Mind is fairly applying area of effect rules. How do you handle these? Example, are those 3 goblins close enough to each other for burning hands or not? My simplest answer for this is it cool? Then yes. Like you're playing a collaborative story, right? Where like as a DM, it's never DM versus the players. It's the DM and the players make a story. And as the DM, you should be a fan. You should be more of a fan of the players and their characters than of the goblins. So if it's cool and the player is excited to use Burning Hands to hit all 3 goblins, then it hits all 3 goblins. At the end of the day, throw more goblins in if you want to make it a more challenging fight. That was an epic move. Do the cool thing. I apply the rule of cool to almost everything I do in tabletop games.
Yeah, I tend to err on the side of the players because I can do whatever I want. I can make it, if it makes it more fun for them, why not? Like you said, you can add more monsters. One of the reasons why we actually started going with a more tactical game later on was because when we were playing AD&D, we had a very adversarial DM who would have the ogre run by the rest of the party and attack the wizard in the back somehow when we did pure Theater of the Mind. So then we got a grid, We got D4s for the players. We got D6s for the monsters, and it just gave a visualization.
Yep.
So at that point, you still needed to describe things because they were just dice.
Yeah.
But it does that for that stuff. I do like minis, and it makes it easier. And I find the best way to like marry theater of the mind with using miniatures is, one, we only use it for tactical situations, combat, and two, if you describe everything first and then put stuff out, I think then that helps. And a lot of times I'm usually too lazy to go and get the exact minis beforehand anyway.
Oh yeah.
No, so I'm gonna have to describe them because no, that's not really an orc or an ogre.
Yeah.
So it's not really a nobleman.
Yeah.
But
it's one of those things where like you and I fully are aware that you don't exist in a 5 foot by 5 foot square, right? You take up, 1.5 of those feet in that square. So if I can hit you with a 5 foot thing, but my arm only goes 3 feet and the sword goes 2 feet and you're a foot away, I miss. So if we can suspend disbelief and say that we exist in 5 foot by 5 foot by 5 foot cubes, sure, you hit the other goblin. Like, I'm not going to take out a measuring stick and be like, yeah, it's awesome. You hit the goblin. They're all on fire. They all make goblin screaming noises. It's rad. You were a badass wizard. Let's keep going.
Well, I guess one of the things you get too is like the gotcha DM.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you didn't retrieve your arrows, or you didn't buy more arrows.
Yeah.
Or, oh, you didn't buy rations. Oh, too bad for you.
Yep.
Like these things that a real person would have to deal with and would be aware of all the time.
Yeah.
You as a player don't have to, because you don't really live in that skin.
Yep.
You're not really immersed in that world. We try to play immersively, but we're not immersed in that world. So the day-to-day things we're not going to think of. Your character knows more about the world and what's going on around him on a granular level than you do as the player. So,
I just disregard those rules. Like arrows, rations, the basic water, those kind of things, like basic necessities. I just disregard and just say you have, like, hell, I don't even make in D&D. I don't even make players buy arrows. You just have unlimited legless arrows. You just shoot until everything's dead. Alternatively, there's a game I'm currently running and a game I'm going to be making, which ties into someone else's question that popped up just now. I do make certain games that I have. You need to worry about rations and arrows and stuff like that. That Simba Room game we discussed earlier, I am intentionally playing with those things because they're important in the sense that like the big bulk of the story is you're starting in this one town and you're going into this massive forest where all the ruins are in this forest, and like there's a lot of bad stuff happening in the forest, and like dark creatures and like corruption and evil elves want to kill you. But if you go in the forest expecting to be gone for 5 days and buy 5 days worth of rations and 5 days worth of arrows and whatever, and it takes longer, now there are negative consequences because you're stuck in the wilderness. And if you have to forage for food in this corrupt area, you can gain corruption. And when you gain corruption, bad things happen to you. So there's mechanics that are inherent that rely on, if you go camping for 10 days and you're actually out for 15 days, what happens in those 5 days? How do you starve and take disadvantage, or do you find forage for food and risk corruption? So like that plays into story and mechanics as well, which is pretty cool.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And like, I would probably handle something like that. Oh, you plan to be out for 5 days and you didn't say anything, so you have 5 days worth of stuff.
Yeah.
And on day 6, you guys are running lean. Or at some point, if it seems like they're going to be out there longer, I might bring that up in case they want to conserve on their stuff. But it just comes down to, for me, it's like there's just certain things your character knows that you as a player don't. I will often go and just give players information, or if they're going to do something, we're like, well, your character would know this piece of information. So do you still want to do that, or do you want to act accordingly? Yeah,
I freely, if you're a character, and that's what I do. I often have session zeros, especially for my homebrew game, because obviously there's literally no way you can know all the things your character would know because they all exist in my head. So I often have session zeros where like we'll decide what country your character's from, what their background is, are they a noble, are they from this town or this town, and then I know what your character knows based on geographical location and upbringing and occupation. That way, at any point in the game, I have this knowledge of what your character is, and say, okay, your character, based on this experience, your character would know X, Y, or Z. Now, what do you want to do?
Yeah, gotcha DMs need not apply.
Oh yeah,
so it's
for
like,
sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm so totally done with that. In my gaming life, at one time I was probably like that, but I think like in that time, like back in the '80s and the early days of D&D, it was like part of being a DM. And I don't know what the turning point was where we're like, you know what, this is kind of stupid. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I was never a gotcha DM. I'm actually a huge. Now that I've been gaming for like 15 years, I can't stand if you have the mindset of it's me versus you. I was 100% a railroad DM because I didn't know any better when I first started, and that I would write the story, and I don't care what you wanted to do. We're going on this story. But fortunately, I was in a place where all of my friends were also brand new to gaming and didn't know any better. It wasn't until I met a DM who was like, okay, so here's like 6 options. What do you want to do? And I was like,
I can pick.
I was like, I don't. What's the quests? He's like, all 6 of them. And I was like, okay, in what order though? He's like, whatever you want. And I was like, I don't know what to do here. Panic.
Too much choice.
Yeah, I was like, okay, so I guess you can give players choices. That's cool. Throw out my whole notebook of what I plan on doing when I get home.
That was the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was definitely a certain point where, and I actually got this from a younger gamer that was gaming with us, where back when I was still preparing material, I would make like a flow chart and have like options off of everything. And that evolved to eventually being like, write down these couple words on a piece of paper, and I think make an adventure.
Yeah, I had that same thing. I had the brainstorming tree where it was like, okay, here's the town, and like here's the few spikes of things around the town, and I thought that was a non-linear adventure. And now I'm at the point where I have an entire world, like 5 continents, various countries, different kingdoms. So I have like high points, like, okay, in this kingdom, here's some stuff that's happening. In this kingdom, here's some stuff that's happening. This faction exists, and this is what this faction's trying to do. So I have bullet points of the things that are happening in the world, and then I get the characters together and say, or the players together and say, hey, what kind of adventure do you want to play? And then I try to decide where that would be best in the world. So now I already know all of the high players in that setting, in that area, that they can interact with. So I'll give them like, your starting adventure, like everyone does. Goblins attack the town. And then they kind of band together and fight the goblins, but the goblins attack the town. Why? Because they're working for this faction. This faction's trying to do this. Here's how they're trying to do it, branching out. And so now they have the option to interact with this faction, or I'll sprinkle in a few other small things that, show light to the other factions that are around, so they can choose to be like, okay, no, leave those guys alone. Let's go deal with these guys. But then I always have these guys progress their clock in their success of their whatever their faction's goal is, which is kind of cool.
Well, and the funny thing too about like the concept of like a linear adventure or a railroad as opposed to sandbox or open world, eventually an open world game will probably become linear, and if you want to call it railroad, but that's when a particular plot thread has evolved and your players have bought into it and they've decided that that's what they want to do. So we got time for one more question. Insect Hunter, you've been asking a lot of good questions. Theater of the Mind, do you have players help keep track of where they're located in relation to monsters and terrain? Sorry, just seems like one more thing for me as the DM to track. I actually don't really worry about it that much. Like no. If you think about real combat anyway, people are always moving around. They're not staying in one place. Look at a boxing match or an MMA match where the combatants are constantly circling, feinting, moving in and out, striking, getting blocked. Well, all that stuff's going on. And so in theory, it's generally not as relevant unless you have obstacles that are in the terrain that you have to worry about.
Yeah. Yeah, this again goes back to my philosophy of it's not player versus the NPC or DM versus players kind of thing. You're there for a collaborative story, so when you pick your friend, when you pick your cast, or you pick your group, your play group, or whatever you have, if you have the fortunate ability to be able to pick your group, there's that sort of trust you have in the players and the trust the players have in the DM that I'm not trying to kill you in this combat. we're working together to tell the story of this combat. So like if I say, okay, you're 5 feet from this guy, you want to attack, oh, this other guy flanks you. And like if I'm describing where you are or you're describing where you are, I know that I trust you enough to know that neither of us are trying to gain advantage on the other person and get the upper hand and defeat you. No, we're just trying to tell a narrative story of how awesome this combat is. And like Dave said, unless you put obstacles or difficult terrain or fantastic terrain, in which case then that is 100% your responsibility to remember as a DM because you put it there.
And the other thing too is like Insect Hunter, you seem a little focused on like the combat aspects of the game, which is fine and it's fun, but you know, for me in my games, combat is just something that happens, you know, amidst everything else.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's something that happens on the way to the, you know, on the way through the story. It's generally they're like blips.
Yeah,
rarely is that stuff the most memorable stuff that happens in our games anymore.
Yeah, I had a campaign that just ended I think a year ago. It was roughly 30 3-hour sessions, so quite a bit of hours into this game. And I think I could count on maybe 2 hands the amount of combats we got into. And that was all because they were essentially like boss combats. So
yeah,
focus on combat.
The last D&D game I ran, there was no combat throughout the whole session. And at the very end, you know, there's a bunch of, they stumbled upon a bull breeding ground inadvertently, but but up until that point, there has been no combat. And when we start the next session with, you know, a couple of bullets fighting over the right to breed, depending on how they do things, there may not even be in combat then either. So, you know, it's completely 100% up to them.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, combat can be fun. You know, I generally plan like one per session,
mm-hmm.
and it does. And there's so many times that my players have just circumnavigated it, which is fine for me.
Yep.
You know, it's just all right. Well, we do other stuff, and now you know they outsmart them, they get away from them. I try if you try and remove the focus from combat in any RPG, it kind of changes the dynamics of the game.
Yep.
And I'm not saying you don't have combat. It's just when you do, they're more meaningful.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And that's it's. I started reading like forever ago, and if you have the time and you want to learn about DMing different styles, Chris Perkins has a blog. Or he has an article on D&D on wizards.com, whatever the heck it is, dnd.wizards.com. And you look it up in their articles and search for the Dungeon Master experience. And then start at the back. It basically chronicles his lessons learned going through his own homebrew world in 4E and how he does things. And it's literally why I run my game episodically. It's why I have a previously on at the beginning of all of my games. And I basically the big thing I learned from him is that run your game like a serial, like a TV show. So you have season 1 has an arc of, you know, what's the big bad guy in the season 1, and then every episode has its own thing. Either it's a, you know, spotlight character moment, it's a big combat scene, it's a huge role playing scene, whatever it is, and kind of stat out your game like that. So like we don't have combat every scene, but when we do have combat, it's probably been building up to for sessions. Like there's been like 3 or 4 sessions building up to whatever's about to happen, and it's going to be awesome. And in those 3 or 4 sessions building up to that awesome combat, there have been character conflicts and character spotlights and role-playing moments that, you know, bring the story to light to why we have a combat here. It's not just like you get ambushed by bandits on the highway. Like, okay, all right, well, I'll just have that. They always have some kind of meaning to them.
You always want to have drama, conflict, and tension,
mm-hmm.
right? And in D&D, we try and do those with combat a lot of times, and we think that that's the only, like in D&D, we think that we can't have conflict without combat, right? They're the same thing, but they don't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
And for any GM out there who's having trouble with getting their players to stop killing things and stop attacking things, well, stop making that the solution. Right, like if they can attack something and kill it, but they still have the problem, eventually they're going to have to think of another way.
Mm-hmm. I actually have in one of my games that I'm running right now is one of the players is the problem. One of the players decided to pick a warlock with a devil pact, and the devil has been, active in his life. He appears to him in dreams, and he gave him these 5 coins as part of the payment. Was okay, I need you to deliver these 5 coins, but he didn't say anything, so the character didn't understand what was happening until the character started having dreams where he was seeing people that he knew in real life, and he was handing the coins to them, and then when he would wake up, he would be 1 less coin, and then bad things started happening to the people with coins. So the whole party was like, hey, what's going on? Because he kind of told them about the dreams and the coins. And so now the party is suspicious of the warlock, and now people are hunting the warlock. And so now the party has to determine whether or not we just give up this warlock, give up our friend, or do we go and stop him? So they eventually go and stop him and find the mercenaries that are actively trying to hunt him down. And it turns out that one of the coins went to one of the mercenaries, and he is doing other bad stuff within the mercenaries, and now they're trying to hunt this guy down within a faction that's trying to hunt them down. And so now there's all this intrigue and infighting. So like the players aren't sure about the other characters, like internal to their own party, and what's the bigger picture with this devil, what's he doing, and it's just this more complicated thing. But it drove to several combats that are, they're awesome combats, and like there's a lot of role playing before the combat, in the combat, and after the combat, which is really cool. But it builds up the tension to what's happening. Are we going to kill this guy? Are the mercenaries going to come? How do we stop them? How do we do this thing until it finally comes to a head? We're like, okay, we need to draw blades. We need to go fight these guys and stop them. That's what it has to be. So it's pretty awesome. It's a great way to build combat.
So even the one game that I'm running, like they always try and like friend the monsters. They don't necessarily always kill them. Like they had assassins that came after them, and they killed one and captured the other one, and made a deal and actually resurrected the other one back to life. So, you can just there's just so many more interesting things you can do.
Yeah.
If you see combat as a smaller part of the game, it'll still always be there, and it's still fun. And if that's your group's thing, that's fine too. You can play the game however you want. These are just different ways you can play.
Yeah.
We are well past the hour mark. Another meeting to run to. So I want to wrap this up. I want to thank you for hanging out with me tonight.
Of course, man. Of course.
Thanks, everyone in the chat, for hanging out. In the description, as always, you can find all the links to where you can go stalk Mike online. The Twitch, the YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all those good things. Is there anything you want to leave people with before we go?
Oh, man. Yeah, guys, if you want to come check out our social media, please feel free to do that. If you guys want to get into some of our games, join the community. Every month, we try to do a 12-hour stream for charity. This year alone, we've raised over $2,000 for Extra Life. The charity is a 12-hour stream with 4 3-hour one-shots. So if you want to jump in and play with me or play with other awesome DMs from the community, that is the best way to do that. And the money goes directly to charity. So it's a way to give back and have fun playing games. So definitely get involved and watch Twitter and watch Discord and all that fun stuff for that information.
Awesome. So with that, until next time, guys, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.